Hi, I'm Wayne Tuttle, and welcome to Chasing Legends. Welcome back to Chasing Legends, and Happy New Year. We're back into another year of Chasing Legends. Hope you're all with me. Please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bells. About section, you can check about every link you need to for us. Check out our website, www.legendofthesuperstitionmountains.com, for everything and anything you could possibly want. We're going to continue to build that sucker. So, all good reference points as to move on from there. So, Happy New Year. We're starting down this another rabbit hole. They seem to be interconnected somehow. This one's probably this week going to be the most and I say documented with tongue-in-cheek, I guess, to some degree. But there's a book published on it. There's videos, interview videos. There's a lot of subject matter. But I don't think it's popularly as well known. It goes back to its attachment to the Superstition Mountains back, I think, to 1971 or so. So we'll start, and it's about a gentleman named Brian Scott. He's from Pennsylvania, and he was born in 1943, October 1943, I believe. And at the age of 16, on his birthday, which I believe is October 14th, he has this moment. He's out where he lives in Garden Grove, California at the time. He's outside as a kid, 16 years old. It's his birthday, and this spear or glowing ball of light comes down into his yard and stuff. And he has this whole UFO experience. Now, it's not an abduction or anything like that. Prepare yourselves, because he just sees this ball of light. It influences him. He believes in UFOs and all this stuff. And that's his big moment. So I believe that would be 1959. After 1959, he later relocates. He lives in Glendale, Arizona, which is in the West Valley of the Maricopa County, Phoenix area. But he and a friend go out. His friend's name, I'm trying to remember what it is. But he has a friend, and Nick Corbin or something like that. They go out to the Superstitions, and they're going shooting. This is March of 1971, I believe. And they go out at 9 p.m. at night in March to go shooting. Yes, I know that takes you all a moment to pause and say, okay, it was dark. And yeah, it was. But they drove out to the end, a quarter mile out to the end of a road in Apache Junction, the foothills of the Superstitions. He and his friend got out, and they go out, and they're kind of looking around and stuff, and they're looking for a place to shoot. And he sees this glowing ball of light coming over the mountains, and he starts looking up at it and following, and it keeps moving closer and closer. And as it gets closer and closer, he realizes it keeps getting larger, and it's oval. He describes it that time not as a spear, but as an oval light. He says until him and his friend Nick are both standing there, and they're looking up, and the whole thing covers the entire sky. It's silverish kind of spear, but it has blue and green lights on the bottom side of it. I don't know why aliens like to fly bright colored objects with flashy lights on them, but that's what he says. So they come over to them while they're getting ready to shoot, and they suddenly get very scared, realizing this isn't an aircraft, this isn't a helicopter, this isn't some sort of balloon, this is something they have no idea what it is, and him and Nick begin to run back to the car. He says they're running, and then suddenly he feels frozen in the moment, and with his arms outstretched and stuff, he has no control, and he's being floated up into the air. Reference Fire in the Sky in Travis Walton's story, because it's kind of that thing. Way before Travis Walton's story, but still kind of the same effect. They're just kind of floating up. So they float up, him and Nick both, up to this deck that leads up, and they can see like an interior door that's closed, bright shining light. And they're both standing there on the edge, and they're looking around, and they don't seem to be able to get away or move or do anything. And he says, then this door opening, aperture opens, and 4 aliens come out. They're all over 7 feet tall. They're kind of grayish, elephant-like skin. They have very long arms, and they have hands with 3 fingers and a weird, awkwardly positioned thumb, whatever that means. So these 4 alien beings come out. They don't say they look like reptiles. I don't think he gives a facial description of any of them in any accounts I found. And they approach them. 2 go to Brian and 2 go to Nick. And they start to undress them, and they're trying to fight, but they have no way to fight. They're just like, can't do anything. He said Nick kept struggling more, but then they start to drag them off into the doorway, and he said Nick passed out. They just drug Nick along, but he stayed on his feet more to see what was going on. He realized he's helpless, but he's trying to understand what is actually happening here. They take them and split them off, and we never hear about Nick really again for the rest of Brian's career that I know of. I've looked for this to say, well, he had to show up somewhere in some aspect, right? He went with him. But they're both returned, but Nick disappears from the story completely here. But Brian continues on. So Brian's brought in down this other area into a room. And when he's brought into the room, he's put up against a wall. And he says he's like stuck to the wall. He can't move. And he's not sure what's going on. He gives a description of apparatus. There's a box with a cable to it. And one of these things, elephant man looking things operating in that. And the aliens are in there. And I guess at this point we have to figure he's butt naked. And he's pinned against the wall, and he can't move, and he feels there's some sort of vapor or mist going around these things, or something going on. And then he just talks about feeling a warm liquid going over his body. And he's standing there, can't really see it. He said he could move his eyes, but nothing else of his body could he move, not even move his head around. So he's just looking around, trying to see what's going on. And he says these things are doing whatever they're doing. He's in a complete full-blown panic. And then another one comes in that's even taller. It's about 9 feet tall. And this one comes in and then takes something and it puts it up by his head. And he can't understand anything. It's just like a garble of all kinds of communication. Just like, I guess, you could take if you're scrambling a radio and all this stuff. And he's like, I don't understand. What the hell? And he's just kind of starting to fall apart. And then the thing seems to take a moment, come back to him, and then he can hear it in clear English now. And the 9-foot tall thing tells him its name. Its name is Voltar. And it's talking to him and says they're from another planet. And this is not how they actually look. They wear these suits because of contamination on the planet. And at the same time also to remember how their planet was vanquished or something like this. It's like an outfit, a uniform, or some sort of visual effect that they wear. And he talks to him and says they're there in peace and all this stuff, and he's there to impart knowledge to him in certain things and aspects and whatever. And talks to him for quite some time. And then suddenly as he's leaving, Brian's trying to talk to Voltar, and Voltar decides to reveal himself to him. And he takes this, whatever it is, off, and then he's just like a 7 and 8 foot tall person with red hair and blue eyes. And he looks very human. And Brian then feels very kind of like, oh, passive about it and all this. I guess he's very relaxed. Brian says initially, then next thing he knows, they're in the car and they're running for the car. And he sees his lantern, he grabs it, they run back to the car and get in the car and they leave. Now, he never mentions Nick, but he says we got back to the car and then we headed back home to Glendale. So that's his first altercation, whatever, with Voltar and the space aliens. He gets home. There's nothing much about it. He remembers he saw something in the sky and all this. Years later, so much other stuff comes out because of psychotherapy and hypnosis. But additionally, again, he finds out in 1973, 2 different occasions, March and I believe October in 1973, he's abducted again out there. He goes back out, same spot, continues to visit that same spot. He's also abducted by something that's smaller, shorter. They call it, in some instances it's referred to as the carrier, and others it's referred to as the host. And Brian's abducted by this, and he's shot up stuff goes on and he gets to learn more. And then in 1975, he goes to the bathroom and his wife goes in and he's missing for 27 days because a ball of light came in the room, and then he vanishes and he comes back. But now he comes back and he can speak like in Greek and ancient Greek, and supposedly can do, what do they call that, auto writing and stuff, and he writes stuff out all the time and backwards and forwards and all these things. I don't see any presentations of it, but they say this is all this stuff. And he starts doing all this theorizing stuff. Now, supposedly he's a bit of a draftsman, or a mechanical draftsman, and does engineering drawings and stuff like this. That's his trade. He continues on his life, but his wife has enough, and his wife leaves, and then a Christian woman comes into his life. He starts doing interviews about what happened to him. And he hooks up with another girl, and they just call her a Christian woman. There's everything I found, a Christian lady. For the next 4 or 5 years, he's with her and another gentleman named James E. Frazier. And Frazier's really important to all this. But he and Frazier start going around, and he starts talking, and he's getting more into this whole thing, and Voltaire speaks through him. And the whole point is to get him to South America, where him and Voltaire, and I think there's another entity called Tiki, who looks kind of Jesus. It's a guy in a robe and stuff who talks to the natives down there and whatever. Oh, who knows? But he's supposed to go down to South America, and then he's going to be fully integrated with these other people to complete a number of tasks. During all this, Brian's going on, and he's supposedly inventing things and engineering things, and I don't see a lot of it. But at one point, he's invited to the White House about something. And it's about oil and gas and energy, supposedly. But the presentation on Brian's end is that Brian's invited to the White House to speak to President Jimmy Carter, but Carter's busy with other things, so they're just interviewed, and then they take their material, and it's in the Library of Congress now, but he never gets actually to meet the president. But President Carter sends him a very nice letter thanking him for coming out. So it's hard to understand exactly how that transpired. There doesn't seem to be a lot of national media news. I looked for newspaper articles through Apache Junction, Phoenix, Mesa, finding absolutely nothing. Then Frazier, once he comes in, starts really kind of working with him. Finally tells Brian Scott, if your alien friends can send me a sign, I will get you down to South America so we can complete this journey for you. Because it was causing Brian Scott a lot of problems, and he lost his family, his wife and children. They'd been in and out of hospitals. He's with this other woman. That fell apart. So Frazier decides, I'll get you down there, but I need a sign, something to tell me that this is not all just crazy. So I guess Voltaire goes through Brian Scott, tells him, okay, there's this big fireball in the sky, going to shoot down the California coast. It does happen. Frazier sees it. Okay, you told me about it. And they find a means and a way through other people, and they finally are able to get Brian Scott down to South America. There he goes, a transformation. Supposedly under hypnosis, he would even talk into a mechanical type voice, guttural voice. And they had all this stuff they talk about, and then he comes back and he has all this knowledge to impart. And he was given a number of tasks and things to accomplish and complete. So he gets down, he starts trying to complete these things. They say suddenly he's a whole different person, and all this knowledge and all these things he does. And he goes through, and then at one point suddenly he's told, you've done everything we asked of you. Now that you've been to the White House and told them this and told these people this and propagated all this stuff, we're done, thank you, and that's it. And Brian Scott, everything leaves him, and he goes right back to normal. They said there were things like he was a chain smoker, and then he quit smoking during this time, and then he starts smoking again. Now, Brian Scott's a very real person. There is a book, Transformation, by James E. Frazier. He wrote it. It's about all the interview. You can find it. I don't always recommend these kind of books, because what I've been doing in researching these down the rabbit hole type stories is that generally once you get kind of into those books, they start out and you're kind of going, okay, I'm not sure how much I buy this. And then they just go off the deep end with a bunch of stuff that you just realize is impossible nonsense. And it is. It's just nonsense. And you wonder, and I know there are many, many people that believe in it, but I look at it and go like, They're just categorically, scientifically, just practical knowledge, just wrong on every possible point. And suddenly you start realizing it seems like a big con. And so I will tell you the book's transformation is James E. Frazier. It's available. It was released in 2002. Brian Scott died in 2009. James E. Frazier has a website. You can find it. I can't remember what it's called. And he has a YouTube channel also. It has some Brian Scott videos of him talking, very short videos of stuff. And they're supposedly making a film about all this stuff. Now, how the film didn't get picked up with Fire in the Sky and some of the other stuff that gets told, and his story didn't get picked up, maybe because it's a little too out there with all the languages and miscellaneous stuff and all the different things. But it is related to the Superstition Mountains that those first 3 abductions, his first obvious alien encounter was in Pennsylvania or wherever, but his first 3 abductions are in the foothills, somewhere close by the end of a dirt road outside of Apache Junction. Why they drove from the West Valley of Phoenix, and if you live here, you'll be thinking, there's a lot of places they could have went instead of going all the way out to Apache Junction, which would take them, back in those days, 3 or 4 hours to get out there to go shooting at 9 o'clock at night to come back. Now, he does have a lot of exact dates. He gives the exact date he had the first abduction and what time. It was 9 o'clock when he was abducted, 11:10 when he got back to the truck. Sorry, 11:11 people. It wasn't 11:11, unless Brian got it wrong. But he's very detailed in some aspects, and then there's areas where it's just not detailed. He did a lot of drawings of the saucers and the aliens and the technology they had and stuff. And by today's standards of what we look at, it kind of doesn't seem, okay, it's like, okay, that's all right. But they also give him all these accreditations. Like he was an engineer, he was a geneticist, he was into all these different things and understood physics and all. While doing all this, there's a number of stories printed. I'm sure it was involved with James Frazier. And some of the interviews and some of the stuff I was able to find was before the book was published. And I found one thing that I wanted to read. Because normally I don't sit in here, and unless it was the Bark Notes previously, I don't read things. But I wanted to read this because this is what kind of steered me, kind of made me pause big time in this. Because if you find most of the accounts, there can be 10, 20 pages of his accounts. It's very detailed, a lot of stuff mentioned that I didn't mention here. But this is important, and I quote from the research. Remember, Brian is a design engineer. That means he creates blueprints. He knows how to do the designs. His proof and performance is design and manufacturing. Some of the information he had was implanted neurologically. This information must be revealed and unfolded in a step-by-step fashion, in an orderly manner, one step at a time. Each step cues the next step. Someone must ask a question, make a commitment, take an action. Then the proper information is released to proceed to the next step. There is really no other good way to work with Brian, except step by step through drawings, plans, models, etc. He needs people who understand this engineering process. Sorry, I'm trying to be very serious. Brian is also a common man who quit school at 16. He knows who he is, what he is. If you want to benefit from your experience with him, you best relate to him as what he is. He doesn't know everything about physics or engineering. He only knows what was given to him. Now, obviously, the first thing I took when I read this, and that stuff is implied heavily in the book, is that, well, if you're involved in the idea, and I will use the term sleight of hand as far as mentalism and those type of things, and we're talking Penn and Teller here, that is a lot of the process you need if you're not very good at it, because you need steps and stages and stuff. And I would like to point out something very important, because they do give him quite the credits on like working with NASA and MUFON and all this stuff. Someone must ask a question, make a commitment, take an action. So the information is revealed and unfolded by a step-by-step fashion in an orderly manner, one step at a time. Each step cues the next step. Which is to say, you go to Brian, you have to ask the right question to get the right answer, which takes him time, and then he cues it, and then it cues the next possible answer in question. Red flags everywhere around me. I do not know what happened to Brian in 1971 in the Apache Junction in the foothills of the Superstitions. I have not been able to locate a single witness or person that knew Brian that lived in the area. I've had people say, oh, there was some guy, UFO, I don't know, I heard about it once. But there's nothing I knew about this. I had no idea of the story, found at least 15 different sources, and there was variations, but I was surprised at how much information about Brian Scott is out there. We could spend 3 hours here, me talking about all these little ins and outs and different things he did and accomplished over the next, for 20 or 30 years. But that's not the point here, is trying to give you guys a good stepping stone to go into. The book is out there, James E. Frazier, if you're interested in this stuff. I just always say the caveat is, everyone can be an author. Anyone can be an author. Like anyone can produce children. If you have a partner, you can have a child. Doesn't mean you're going to be a good parent or the child will turn into a good adult. None of that matters. You can write something and have it published, and it can be a piece of garbage. So anyone can be an author. I'm not saying all things published by some of these people are a piece of garbage, but I will be donating or getting rid of some books after we do these rabbit hole discussions, because some of them open up, interest you heavily, and then everything falls apart, and then I have 250 pages of stuff. I read the whole book, but there's 250 pages I need to get out of my head and forget because I realize how much garbage is in there. And recently I had one about Sedona, and we are preparing to go possibly to the Sedona rabbit hole, and when I get there, some of that stuff, you know, get a job at Circle K or something. You don't have to write a really crappy book to get this stuff imparted. So anyways, and Voltaire and Volton and all these things, they seem familiar. I don't know if that's where they got it from some of the movies, like Dude, Where's My Car? But it sounds similar to me. So, funny reference there. But I wanted to share this story because it does have its roots in the Superstition Mountains. I've never seen a silvery craft with green or blue lights. We had what we called the hopper light that night. And it was kind of an ovalish light, kind of a bit of something up there on the rim. I don't know what it was. It didn't come down. All of us didn't lose our memories. I still remember the group discussion. Greg Davis recorded it, so it had to still transpire. Trevor was there doing some filming and work. So we know everything that took place. Maybe there was too many of us for them to abduct all 100 of us that night. Who knows? But no one was lifted up and nobody did that. So there's the story, though, of Brian Scott. So we got that one out of the way. There's more to come. I hope everybody enjoys this because we seem to be getting a lot of people viewing and getting into it. I know I'm kind of a little sarcastic with this stuff, but it's hard to kind of believe too far into these stories when you find too many problems. Like, hey, let's just go out and start shooting at 9 p.m. at night. Take a 3-hour drive to go do it. There's problems with these stories that continue. And you see a growing pattern. And yeah, it's nice to get attention and be on the radio and meet Art Bell and have people inquire about this stuff, but I don't know. I just don't know. And personally, from my viewpoint, I've never seen anything in the mountains similar to any of this. But there are people that still make the claim to fame. Of course, there are no photographs of any of it, but there are drawings. So you can go witness, check it out, buy the book if you want. It's out there. I think it's 15 to 20 bucks. You can find a copy. Go pick it up, read it for yourself. You can, buyer beware in that area, right? And maybe we'll go through a list of the 10 books I had to read that I regret once we're done with all this, because that might be an interesting one. So there you go. Brian Scott, his abduction 3 times over in the Superstition Mountains. Then he's getting abducted out of bathrooms and stuff, and back in California and Mesa and Glendale and other places. Don't know how many abductions he had. I kind of eventually stopped and started to just kind of peruse over things because it was just getting a little kind of far out there for me. But anyhow, because you think you can kind of catch that stuff. But anyways, there you go. Brian Scott, his abduction in the Superstition Mountains, probably the most detailed documented. You look it up, Brian Scott UFO abduction. Bang, you're going to get some hits, a bunch of stories, Reddit, and a bunch of places. They've got websites that have the information. There you go. Hope that makes your day. Hope that opens up your new year. Hope this month you don't get abducted by any reptilians or any elephant-looking guys or any grays or different types of people, the host, the carrier, or Voltan. Hope you're all well and have a great new year, and we'll see you the next time here on Chasing Legends.